Hello, hello, and welcome to Inspire Me Forward. And my name is Linda Watson. I am your host for today, as well as the founder of Inspire Me Forward. And this is a platform where we just share stories of life, love, and everything that happens in between the two of those. And we know that in sharing stories, we help other people feel just that they're not alone, that we have those similarities and between us. And for today, our episode 23 is called The Weight of the World. And I would like to start with introducing our two guests. So, Kathy Moffatt, would you just do a short introduction of yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Kathy Moffatt. I live in Merrickville, Ontario, Canada, which is near the nation's capital. And I live here with my husband and 9 horses, 2 dogs, some barn cats, lots of wildlife and nature.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And my other guest is Melissa Clark. Melissa, would you introduce yourself?
My name's Melissa Clark, and I live in the Barrie, Ontario area. I am enjoying a 27-year-long career in hairstyling. I'm a mom to Fiona, my almost 13-year-old daughter, and my dog Hugo.
How wonderful. And I have Hugo's sister, so that's how we know each other. Awesome. So today is about the weight of the world. And I wanted to start with something that I heard this week with the passing of Norman Jewison, the TV producer or the movie producer. I believe he was both. But it was something that really struck me was he was giving an acceptance speech. And he said, just tell stories. He says, don't worry about, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, don't worry about the top 10. Don't worry about the genre. Don't worry about the stats and demographics. He says, just tell stories. Tell stories that make people laugh, that make people cry. And somewhere in there, there's a bit of a reflection of oneself in that story. And I just thought that was, I had to go back and re-listen to the whole interview just to find that one bit, because I thought that's exactly what we're doing. Is we're just telling, not just, but we're telling stories. And that's, that telling our life stories, and that helps others, it helps ourselves. So today we decided to call this one The Weight of the World, because as women, we tend to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. I know physically, women tend to have more shoulder and upper back problems because we just feel the weight. There's so much to do, we feel the weight. And in that, we find we do need coping mechanisms. We need to be able to deal with that stress and that weight. And how do we alleviate that weight? So, backstory a little bit. Melissa and I had a conversation called off my chest in when did we have that? In December. And then Kathy and I had our conversation in December as well, didn't we, Kathy? I believe. Yes. But Melissa then saw Kathy's interview and went, wait a minute, there's a commonality here. So we began a conversation between the three of us and decided to bring this forward. And it's the use of alcohol as a coping mechanism. And it is a very common use of alcohol. And we wanted, you both wanted to tell your story here and then discuss some of that. So we're going to share your stories. I'll give you time to share your stories. We're going to talk about those coping mechanisms and how we can change that to healthy coping mechanisms and what you did. And then we're going to look at the bigger picture a bit as to why is this happening? What's happening? What can we do to bring about maybe a healthier sisterhood, for want of a better word, but a healthier support mechanism between women where that's not needed, and where there's an authentic and honest space that we can hold for each other, and have those healthy coping mechanisms. So that's what we're going to do. We're breaking into 3 spaces today. So Melissa, I'd love for you to take some time, however much you need, to just share your story.
Okay, so my relationship with using alcohol started in my late teens and early 20s. It was mostly social. Sometimes binge drinking. It's common when you're experimenting with substances to go all out sometimes. So yeah, my bar star era, I, you know, would drink way too many drinks, and it made me feel less inhibited, more confident in social settings, a little more extroverted than I actually was. But it was nothing habitual. It was a very much take it or leave it. I think a lot of times that I did use it, it was kind of peer pressure. Throughout the rest of my 20s, I didn't really touch it very much. It really started in my mid 30s when I turned to it as a coping mechanism. So I was in a pretty unhealthy relationship. And when that started to break down, I turned to it for comfort and for a stress relief. And it kind of, you know, spiraled a little bit from there. It became more of a common part of my diet and day-to-day life. And I was aware. And so I'd take some steps back, you know, and try to avoid using it as such. But it just became such a pattern. And it went on from there. It got even better. So when I separated from my daughter's dad, it really, really turned into daily use. But I was aware, and you know, I'd say to myself, do I have a problem? Like, am I addicted? What's going on here? And you know, the shame that comes with that, and so on. So I'd have dry weeks and kind of think then, oh, well, I don't have a problem because I just went all week without a drink. So let's celebrate by drinking. And then when, you know, I started practicing more mindful drinking, like drinking with intention. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term, but it's kind of like saying, yeah, I'm going to allow myself, you know, especially in social situations, you know, to have a drink, have a few drinks when I'm having fun with friends or celebrating something. So that seemed to work for me for a while until the pandemic happened. So my industry was heavily impacted by lockdowns. So yeah, I was at home. Grade 3 math stressed me out, and I was homeschooling my daughter. I was afraid of financial impacts of not working and all of the uncertainty when I would be able to open up again. So yeah, there was like a lot of financial stress, a lot of emotional stress, and a lot of things happening at the same time. I got a new puppy. That was very stressful. He had a lot of behavioral issues, and I felt so cut off from the world because, you know, I couldn't take him to puppy training. Everything that I could get for support was online. It wasn't really good enough. So yeah, I just really got into it out of loneliness, stress, panic.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. Yep. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And Kathy.
Well, I think similar to Melissa, I mean, I wasn't really a drinker as a young person. Both of my parents were heavy drinkers, and I always told myself, I'm not going to be like them. I'm not going to be an alcoholic. I was very much not wanting to be on their path. And so, I mean, I started drinking when most people do, when, you know, late, not even, I didn't even really drink much as a teenager. It's when I went to college, you know, I drank a little bit. It was always social. You go to a pub, I could take it or leave it. It wasn't daily, it was weekends. I didn't even binge or anything. And that continued that kind of a relationship with, which was a social thing out with friends. Later on, it would have been out with my husband. I mean, he drank too, but he drank like I did. You know, you'd go for dinner, you might share a bottle of wine, etc. And I never really gave it a lot of thought. And what changed for me with that was I had a corporate job at at that point. That probably started, well, I got into it in my mid-20s, but I escalated at a relatively high level within a company, working in a man's type of world, a technology company. And I was in these situations where drinking was a lot part of the culture. And so the drinking was not moved away from social, more to being an expectation of work meetings and meetings with clients and sales meetings. And then they were always drinking. And then the drinking at meetings was like, every time you're at a meeting, every day you'd be drinking after you were done your day's work. And so it started to escalate there. And then I found that when I would go home, I would drink a little more, but I never thought it was a problem because everybody drank like that. Like all of my friends drank like that. Everybody did. And I never really thought that it was a problem at all. And I mean, that continued for a while. As the corporate stuff became more stressful, I found myself starting to have a glass of wine at the end of the day. So it started with, done my day's work. I'm going to crack open a bottle of wine. I'm going to have a glass of wine while I'm making dinner, have a glass with dinner. Never considered even that to be a problem. Everybody does that, so, but I found myself that during the workday, I'd be thinking about that. Like I couldn't wait until my day was done so I could have that glass of wine. And even then I didn't think that was a problem because all my girlfriends were doing that as well. So, but there was a little bit, in hindsight, looking back, there was a dependency starting then. And when it really started to escalate, I have 2 children. They're both adopted. That's a whole other story. I won't get into a lot of the details, but what I can tell you is that my youngest son got into a lot of trouble in his teenage years with drugs and all sorts of things, running away, skipping school, crime. There was a whole 10-year period where that started and then started to escalate. And then with that, that's when my drinking went from, I'd like a glass of wine to I'm going to decompress at the end of the day type of routine, to I need a glass of wine to settle myself and medicate myself. And so I would reach for that when I was having a lot of stress with my son. And at that point, it truly became a daily thing. So never a day thing. I would function beautifully all day in my corporate job and function all day. And it turned out that 1 glass wasn't enough, 2 wasn't enough, and why not just finish off the bottle? So then it got to the point of, now you're drinking a bottle of wine a day. And then in my mind, I kind of knew, well, this is probably not healthy. And certainly there were some health things I know now that were probably related to that, but it was just my way of coping with the stress of the job, trying to hold down this big job and maintain, sobriety during the day, which I did. I never became someone that drank during the day, but I just couldn't wait until the end of the day to have a drink. And I found I would need more alcohol in order for me to feel decompressed and relaxed and get rid of the stress. And as I say, that went on for a good 10 years. And even then, was it a problem or not? I don't know. Like I had a lot of friends that daily wine drinking, it's sophisticated. You're a sophisticated businesswoman. You're supposed to be drinking wine. There's nothing wrong with it. Like everybody does it. It's not like, I'm putting a needle in my arm or something like that. I had this judgment all about that. But it got to a point where things with my son started to really escalate. I'd be getting up in the morning and I'd be hungover every morning and trying to just get rid of the hangover and cope through the day. And I found that this coping mechanism wasn't working anymore. And there was a kind of a critical moment in my life where something pretty horrific happened with him. I had to go sit through a trial with him where he had been he had been accused of some horrible crimes. And I was using a lot of alcohol then to cope with that. And I was feeling awful. And I thought, and he had drug problems. And then it was occurred to me, here I have a son who's got addiction problems and I am trying to manage that. And here I am drowning away my sorrows every night with a bottle of wine. So I started to realize that it was becoming a problem, and a few other little things happened. And then I wouldn't say it was a rock bottom moment. I don't think it was that, but it was more of a realization that, you know what, I don't think this is normal and I don't like the way I'm feeling. And if I continue like this, this is not good. And so that's where, that's where that took me. And that was probably, it was before the pandemic. So that would have been in late 2018, early 2019, when, I got to a point where I couldn't cope anymore with the situation with him and dealing with all of that. And then the drinking, it was like, drinking alcohol then was like putting gasoline on my anxiety. My anxiety was through the roof, and I was drinking to cope with it. And I realized it was just making it worse. And yeah, so then I knew, I had to take some steps to make some changes.
Sure. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. So then let's talk about the moment, or and Kathy, you've touched on it there, that time of going, and I know it's very different for both of you, but that time of going, something's got to change. And what was that? What were some of the feelings you went through? I know we've talked in our conversation before about judgment and those feelings of shame and blame and labels that are put on it, labels that we put ourselves on it. But maybe take us through those times, or that moment when it changed. So Melissa, I'll go back to you on this one to start.
It really changed for me when I started to get embarrassed about it. Like, we have some people in the neighborhood that collect bottles. So on recycling day, they were spending a lot of time in front of my house. So I started to recognize that, the neighbors are going to hear all the clanking, and, I'd be drinking a bottle a day, and I'd have more to recycle if my friends were over, because we all drank together. And the financial impact actually is what got me. I started doing the math. So here I am, so stressed out because I cannot work, right? I'm the sole provider for my household. And, my parents were helping me out a lot. But yeah, I started doing the math on how much I was actually spending on the alcohol. And if you look, like, the cheapest bottle of wine is like $11, $10, $11. You're drinking one of those a day, right? Yeah. So sad to say, my motivation to be mindful again was financial and shame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then what really turned it around was my diagnosis of breast cancer. So that was a year and a half ago. Yeah, and I just started looking at, I had genetic testing done. That's kind of part and parcel if there's a pattern in your family. And I had a couple of great aunts that had breast cancer. So I qualified for that testing, but I don't have the genetic mutation that would cause that. So I asked the genetic specialist that that was assigned to my case, what caused it then? Like, why did I get breast cancer? And they're very general, DNA damage, right? So I'm like, okay, DNA damage. And I remember writing it down and then leaving it and then exploring it further a little while down the road from that day. So I Googled like DNA damage, breast cancer, and like it's thousands of things, right? DNA damage is like, it can be anything. But what really stuck out to me was previous tobacco use and the current alcohol use. It's directly connected to 7 major cancers, breast cancer being one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
What was the day that you just, and it maybe was over time, but the day you just sort of went, done. What was in that moment for you? Like, you just went, done.
I think, yeah, I had gone a while without it after lying my face off to all of my doctors that I only had a couple drinks a week or a few drinks a week, right? Yeah. Which I should probably come clean to at one of my next appointments, because I've had a lot of time to reflect on it now, and how ridiculous that even was. Like, lying to myself, lying to everybody, and lying to an oncologist is pretty gross. Anyway, so Yeah, I just stopped. I just stopped having it part of a routine thing. I developed other strategies to deal with stress and anxiety. And then I started recognizing it really was the wine consumption that
Mhm.
was screwing up my system and causing a lot of it because you get stuck in the loop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Most
I've
definitely.
had a few drinks here and there, you know, because like, why not? And it doesn't agree with me. And I'm done even trying having a glass of wine with dinner because it's a nice dinner. I'll have a glass of wine. I've lost my taste for it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
lucky,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
that it's
absolutely.
just shut off like that for me now.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was a period too where I'd be out doing errands and go, you know what? I need a treat. I'm going to reward myself because I was always
Mm.
rewarding myself. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to get a bottle. And then, you know, and I pulled into the parking lot and just gone, no, you know what? I don't feel like having it. I think a lot of times, maybe, perhaps, and I joke about it, but I actually wonder if sometimes I was drinking as much as I was just because I'm thirsty, because I can put anything in a wine
Mm.
glass is what I did for a while because it was very habitual for me. I always had a wine glass
Interesting.
on the counter in my hand, right?
Yeah.
So I just switch it up with a different beverage, even water. It's all good. And now, you know what? I don't even really touch my wine glasses unless there's nothing else clean.
I think I got rid of mine. Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. That's really, yeah, that's raw and real, and I appreciate that. So we'll come back to those healthy coping mechanisms in a bit that you, I would say, replaced with. But Kathy, I'd like to, I know you touched on that, but if you want to add, like, so what were those moments and how was that transition?
Yeah, so it wasn't an instant thing. And I wanted to say, you know, I resonate so much with what Melissa said about the recycling and the clanking bottles and thinking, oh my God, I've got so many bottles here. And if you want to return them, it's like, I better go to another liquor store to return them to, or the beer store, because I don't want them to think I drink that much, right? So, or what do my neighbors think if I throw them in the recycling bin and bury them? Are they going to come and look? Or what do the garbage men think? So there's so much shame involved with that too. And so when I started to feel the shame and I was starting to hide the empty bottles, I knew there was something wrong. So that was a little bit of a aha. And for me, what happened was, and it was a little bit of a journey. I had this pivotal moment where something horrible happened with my son. Well, I mean, he assaulted another girlfriend, and it became kind of a public thing and became viral on social media. And I had some of these very supposedly helpful friends say, "Oh, is that your son that did that?" Sending me messages, and I was mortified. And so that happened, and I'm like, I don't know how to deal with this after having dealt with so many other things up to that point. And then I had a horse die, like within a day of that, which was traumatic. And then I realized I can't deal with this. I can't deal with all of this emotion that's going on within my body. And I went and I called my doctor, and I never talked about the alcohol, but I needed counseling for the other stuff. And it was going to the counselor that started it for me. And even with the counselor, I didn't really fess up, you know, and I didn't fess up to my doctor either, because you're embarrassed about it, right? So with the counselor, even, I didn't fess up to that. But we talked about a lot of other things, the underlying issues as to the whys of why I was feeling the way I was doing. And then drinking, of course, being one of those coping mechanisms, or I perceived to be a coping mechanism. And she gave me some tools at the counseling session, which allowed me to explore other things. And one of them was meditation. I started using a meditation app just to kind of calm my nervous system. She gave me some things to read about cognitive behavioral therapy. I did a little bit of that. And then I took up yoga. And actually taking up yoga was a really huge deal for me, because I realized I could calm my anxiety and get in my body and feel better with the yoga. And when you do things like doing yoga and you're meditating, and then I would, you know, and then I went back to the gym, and then you start working out. Like, why in the hell would you be doing all of that shit and then chugging a bottle of wine a night? It's like, really, oh, I'm going to go and get all healthy. And then I thought, you know what, there's a thing with the wine. I really need to do something about that. And what happened was I was on social media and one of these apps came across. It was one of these 30-day quit alcohol challenges. I can't remember there's a lot of organizations that do these things. I think it was 1 year no beer. And I looked at some of the testimonials and I thought, I'm going to sign up for this. 28 days. And I'm going to sign up for this and give this a try. And so I did just one of these challenges and figured, I'll test it for a while to see how dependent I am and see how it goes. Well, after I did, even after a week, and I, like you, Melissa, had some periods where I would stop to prove myself I didn't have a problem, to immediately go back and drink. I have no problem, I can drink. But when I did that, and I was pretty committed to it, they had really good tools, daily tools that allowed you to be accountable to yourself. And I just started to feel better and better. And then I thought, oh, they have a 90-day challenge. Let's try that. And so then I did that. And then they had a year challenge. And then I did that. And so that was the big movement into that. It was supported. So there was a community around it, an online community around it, and some tools and things. And at the same time, I was increasing my yoga practice. I was doing a lot healthier things. And why would you put, poison into your body while you're getting healthy all the other way? So that's how it happened
Yeah.
with me.
Excellent. Thank you. So what I'm hearing is different transitions, for want of a better word there, yet a lot of the same feelings and a lot of the same emotions that going through. So Kathy, you spoke of like calming that nervous system. I think that's a really key point there, is being able to calm that nervous system without the alcohol and finding ways. So Melissa, I'll just jump back to you here. And what were some of the ways that you found to calm that nervous system, especially as you were going through treatment and things like that? What were some of those healthy coping mechanisms that you replaced with?
Yeah, I kind of went through a huge transition in that regard. I went through menopause. They had to remove my ovaries because my cancer was hormone fed. So the estrogen had to be removed from my body. So I was facing menopause. So I was doing a lot of reading about alcohol, about menopause, and all of these symptoms and, symptoms and side effects from some of the medications and treatments. Yeah. So going back to what Kathy just touched on, you're adopting fitness into your life and all these healthy things, and it makes no sense. It's nonsensical, absolutely nonsense to try and do anything to better your health and then go home and reward yourself with wine. So I just started figuring out the impact of alcohol on your hormones, right? Because I was so freaked out about not having estrogen and what that was going to leave me as a woman. So which we touched on in my episode. That was like a big thing for me to wrap my head around. So I just started having all these aha moments, like connecting the alcohol use to hormone function, and just realizing how important it is to live a healthy lifestyle as much as you can. And, there's so many simple things that anybody can put into place. And I started with getting a proper night's sleep, right? So without the alcohol in my system, that was attainable, because my usual was, drink wine until you fall asleep because it relaxes you, or makes you pass out. And then I'd be up at 2 a.m. and all the anxiety would be back tenfold. Then I'd be up for, a couple hours thinking and stressing. And yeah, so once I got my circadian rhythm in check, and made all kinds of other improvements. Like I used to take all these supplements and vitamins. I don't know what I was thinking. So I was eating like crap, drinking, and taking supplements, thinking I was doing my body any good. Yeah. So it was just kind of learning about, garbage in, garbage out. Like your body just cannot process everything. Well, my body couldn't process everything I was putting into it, right? So it had to eliminate the food I was taking in. It had to digest and eliminate all the vitamins and supplements I was putting in, and then alcohol on top of that. So it's really no wonder I was pretty run down, overweight. So when I quit drinking, I lost 20 pounds right away. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then I've lost a further 20 pounds, by getting the right kind of exercise and, being more mindful of what I put in my body generally. Not that I'm super strict or on any sort of diet, but it has been a diagnosis like that's pretty scary.
Yeah.
So if that's what it takes for me to have motivation, I'm kind of glad it happened because it woke me up to a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know when I come visit you, we always eat super healthy. And I know I always feel really good afterwards. I will stay with you for a minute, and then Kathy, I'll go back to you. Is around the idea of community and support, and did that change? How did that manifest for you when you transitioned away from alcohol?
Um, oh, I don't want to get emotional.
Yeah, I thought
But
this was good. Might be an emotional question, but that's okay. Safe space.
yeah, I did it without any like professional support.
No.
But there were a couple of key things in my life that made it a lot easier for me to stay away from drinking.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think everything just fell into place for me, maybe karmically that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Make the one change and everything else to sort of
Yeah.
is lined up, ready to go.
Yeah.
Just
And
need
it's
to make
hard
that.
too, because
Yeah.
I don't want to make anybody feel bad, but you get
Yeah.
into, you have certain friends for certain reasons,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and a lot of times the people you attract into your life are because they're so much like you and you become so bonded. So that's been a worry of mine too, is like maintaining friendships without it getting weird because, they
Yeah.
still enjoy having drinks and I don't.
Yeah.
So, we're all old enough now. There's no peer pressure. I've heard of a lot of people that chose to abstain from alcohol use and they almost get peer pressured by their adult friends, like, oh, come on, have a
Mm.
drink,
Yeah.
So I haven't, you know what? I guess I'm just so lucky that way. I just haven't been around anybody that's made me feel bad about my decision not to drink. But you know what, too? I haven't been the most social because everything I've gone through. So maybe as life becomes a little bit more normal for me, maybe I will fall into those situations, with old friends who are used to me being, oh,
Yeah. And community, I think, as you're talking there, it's like community. I think there's this idea of community being big. A community can be two people that just hang out together and talk. And
yeah,
if that's supportive and loving, then that's
yeah,
community, and
yeah,
that's what's needed in that moment. And we getting away from this idea that community has to be sitting in a circle of 20 women, and which is great, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have to be that.
no.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Kathy, I'll let you flow into you would start to talk about yoga and meditation, but and then maybe into community and your support system.
Yeah, so from a community point of view, because I had quit originally with kind of an online program and which had an online community. So I was involved in that. Now, these weren't people I knew, but they were people that you could share, things like, as Melissa says, the 2 or 3 a.m. wake up covered in sweat and the anxiety through the roof. I mean, that's so typical of people that drink too much. Think you're sleeping great, now you're really passed out, and then you wake up. And you could share things like that with other people in a non-judgmental way because they understood. Not everybody would understand that. So I had that. Anonymous in a way, you knew each other's names, but online and anonymous. And of course, and this was happening a lot. Then COVID came, and of course, community in terms of physical community, like AA or something. I that never resonated with me anyway. So I never did that. Community around me in terms of friends, etc. So, and I did have a bit of peer pressure, I have to say, and here I am, I'm 62 years old and talking about peer pressure. And there were
Mhm.
people in my life, women in my life, women of my vintage in my life, where we would be going out and they would say, what would you like to drink? And I'd say, soda water or whatever. And then they, well, you're not drinking? You're not drinking? Used to be like our wine ringleader. I'm like, no, I'm not drinking. And well, why not? You can just have one. No, I'm not drinking. Like, and I'm finding myself having to justify myself. So I had a little bit of that. But a lot of times in reflection on that, when people are curious about that, about you, they're probably confronting their own what's in their glass, right? So because you're not. So and it makes them uncomfortable. So when I realized that, it's like, it's not my problem, it's yours, right? So there was a little bit of that. And I must admit, there are some friends, or I would call them now not so much friends, but more than acquaintances, that I just don't hang around with anymore because the whole socialization with these women was always involved around drinking. It didn't matter what you were doing. Oh, we're going to go for dinner and drink. Oh, we're going to go to a hockey game and drink. We're going to go to yoga. And then after yoga, we're going to go to a pub and drink. Like really and I'm like, I didn't want to put myself in that situation anymore because it was so incongruent with how I was feeling. And I didn't feel like sitting with a group of people where I wasn't being, who I was. So I did make some alterations there. It's not like I said, see you later, Charlie, but I just chose not to engage, right? And the other thing I discovered about myself becoming, sober was that I'm really an introvert, right? And people who've met me would think, oh my God, Kathy, you're an extrovert. No, I'm not. Drinking made me extroverted though. And because of that, and not drinking, and now I'm able to be, the introverted person that I am, I don't really want to go out and socialize that much. And more often than not, I mean, I'll go for lunch more than dinner. Lunch doesn't tend to involve alcohol as much as dinner.
Yeah.
Someone wants to meet, let's meet for coffee, right? Set that stage. And so that I feel comfortable in myself. Now I can go out with a group and I can go to a bar, if there's an event, and I don't have a problem. But given an opportunity at 9:00, I leave, right? 9:30, I leave because I don't see anything in it, because then people start to get drunk, right? And I don't like being around drunk people because I think, oh my God, that's probably what I was like. They're loud and, obnoxious, and they're telling bad jokes. And I'm like, and I'm not trying to be judgmental because I was like that. It's just, I just don't want to be part of that. So the community shifts a bit. And Melissa said something interesting. You attract what you are. Now, I don't attract people like that anymore. I attract much different people. And interestingly enough, the women, and it's all women that I've met recently, most of them don't drink. And not necessarily because I've curated that way, just people I've met, they don't. Because they're people I've met through the other things that I do in my life, which are around health and wellness and what I do for a living, which is all wellness related with horses. Wellness and drinking don't go together. So typically they don't, or if they do, it's like, once in a while, not people that everything has got to have a glass of wine in your hand. Those aren't the people I'm attracting, and the ones that were part of my group, I just don't, I don't socialize with them anymore. Because I don't find it interesting or fun, and I'm not extroverted. I need to, if I'm going to be extroverted and do that, I need to be drinking, and I'm not extroverted, so I just don't do it.
Yeah. It's owning the introversion. It's owning it, and that's who I am. That's the space I'm comfortable in.
Yeah.
And no judgment on it, no label on it. That's where I'm most comfortable. So
no.
Yeah.
No,
So
I think the stats are,
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're a stats person. And please jump in here with any. So I'm going to transition here to our bigger picture. I think you made a comment there about yoga and drink. And we've all had, the three of us have had this conversation on sort of that bigger picture and the advertising towards it. Why are women drinking? Why, what's the advertising towards women? And it is big. And, with a few articles that we've, shared, and we will certainly share them in our resources afterwards, it's that, and I find it really interesting. There was one from BBC, and it was the alcohol industry has basically taken a page book out of the tobacco industry. And I look back on that, and it was the Virginia Slims in the 60s. And it was that you've come a long way, baby. And it's this towards women. And they're building on empowerment. And they're building on a lot of these emotions, I guess, or characteristics that a lot of women are coming to workshops and coming to circles to work on. But here's an industry that is pushing the same thing and building that. And there's another that there's a 13% more women will spend more on something that is directed at only women. So if you have a cooler or something that's pink and it's got a cute name, it's directed towards women, they'll spend that just like we would on makeup or skincare or clothing, something like that. So it's really interesting to, for myself to sort of step back and look at this bigger picture in all of this. And the fact that it's changed. So Kathy, you shared, and we'll certainly share a TED Talk on a woman that wrote a book called Drink. And it was 10 years ago. And she quoted the guidelines on drinking, and it was, or alcohol use. And it was 10 drinks a week. When I saw that, I went to the current guidelines, and basically it's 0. It's a continuum, and it says, well, 0, there's no effects. 2 a week. So it's gone from basically 10 to 2 or 10 to 0 with all that. And Melissa, you've cited that the carcinogens and it's just a real change, but it's a change in the industry and that. So I'd love to just open it to both of you as to where, and maybe Kathy, I'll go back to you to start this time, is just, it's just sharing your thoughts on the whole. And I know you've done a lot of research and a lot of reading on this, so please jump in with any stats and things. But yeah, what's your thoughts on this whole bigger picture?
Well, I mean, and we're talking about women, right? So, the alcohol industry recognized, back in the 90s that, the business wasn't growing like it was, and where's my next demographic? And there's a lot of stats on this. So I've done a lot of research on this and read about it. So it was in the mid 90s. What do we need to do to increase consumption of alcohol? Because man, it had flattened out. It kind of, at least in Western culture, it flattened out. And so the obvious demographic was women. And so this is when you start to see, I call it the pinking of the LCBO, right? So, and stuff specifically marketed at women, right? Things like Skinny Girl. Here's another, let's go work out and be skinny, but you can drink wine because it's called Skinny Girl and it's healthy. That's the perception. And that's how that's how our brain works. And you talk about it being marketed to women, and women want things marketed to them. And there's some reasons for that too, but so all the marketing. So the coolers, the development of the cooler industry, which is targeted at young women. You get young women hooked early, then they're going to continue to drink. And coolers are typically with alcohol, like hard alcohol in them too. So the guys are drinking beer, and the girls, they're drinking coolers with vodka and rum and all these things, which, pound per pound are going to be much more intoxicating than the stuff that the guys are drinking. So that's one thing. So the girls are getting hooked on harder stuff young. And then you get older, it's the sophistication thing. So then all of these wines and things with beautiful packaging, totally aimed at women. And you only have to walk into the LCBO to see it. I don't recall, when I was in my 20s and 30s, all of this stuff, cupcake wine and, labels with like horses on them. I mean, come on, like who's that targeted at? And so just take a peek, right? So there's all of this marketing aimed at women so that the alcohol industry could grow. And in countries where wealthy countries, the gap between women drinking and men's drinking has narrowed. So men it's flattened out pretty much. In women, it's increased. And so there's a narrowing of gap there as well, which is alarming. And it's all because of this. And we're drawn to it. Why are we drawn to it as women? I think women, and we crave each other. We crave a sisterhood. In modern culture today, we are brought up to be, we've got to have a really good job. We've got to be tough. We've got to be beautiful. We've got to be skinny. We've got to be a beautiful mom, great wife, a great cook, all of these things. You say the weight of the world on you, and it forces us not to be supportive of one another. It forces us to be competitive with each other, because that's the way the society has moved. Why that's happened, I mean, you could go on and on about it, but that's how I believe it is. That's how I felt coming through my corporate life and my motherhood life and my being a wife and all of this stuff. And so we don't tend to develop what I would call really beautiful sisterhood type of relationships. And we crave it and we're attracted to it, right? So we're attracted to things that push that. What's pushing that? Pink bottles. I can open the wine. It's my friend, and that's how I used to. I mean, I was in love with my wine. It is my friend, all of these things. So I think that's, that's part of it. And it's also, of course, it's socially acceptable, right? So nobody says anything to you if you're drinking. It's the only drug you have to justify not taking, right? So someone offers you a glass of wine, what's the matter? You've quit drinking? What's the matter with you? Like, is there something wrong? There's nothing wrong with alcohol. It's good for you. Such and such a study says red wine is good for you. Like, really? If I had gone to, a friend and said, oh, I've quit my heroin habit, they would go, good for you. What can I do to support you? Whatever. You say to your friends, I've quit drinking. A couple things happen. Makes them confront their drinking. And I'm not judging anyone else's drinking, okay? I take total accountability for mine, no judgment in anybody else, but they do. There's that, oh. And then there's that, oh, I wonder how fun she's going to be at the next party. Are we going to invite her? Are we not going to invite her? All of this kind of crap comes up. But there's no real feeling of a sisterhood where we can come together as women and support each other. And so that's what I feel. And business has tapped into that.
Yeah.
And and the evidence is there. And middle-aged women in particular, because we're squeezed, right? We're in mid-career or maybe end of career. We've got all these expectations on us to do everything, aging parents, kids, kids going off the rails, everything in society. And oh yes, and then social media says, oh, you need to be skinny. You're an older woman, you got to look young. I mean, all of this crap is put upon us and we don't support each other enough. And then what do? We find other ways to cope. One of the ways of coping is drinking.
Yeah. All right. So lots to think about there. Melissa, I'll let you.
Yeah, just as Kathy said, it's just like this whole culture that's been created around like all the girly wines. You've got these labels, girls' night out, the term mummy juice. There's a plethora of memes directed at drinking and normalizing using alcohol. And a couple of my really good friendships were based in drinking, right? I guess that's how we connected, like enabling each other, like, without saying any words, like really getting it, like, oh, sister's going through a hard time like I am, right? So you just, you find this connectedness in it. But at the end of the day, there's so many other things that you can find in common.
Very true.
Yeah. And just, and furthermore, as far as any health benefits to alcohol, the big one is, antioxidants. You get antioxidants from red wine. You can get antioxidants from eating the right foods, without the poison in it. So it's just all of these little things, that you've got to like kind of retrain your brain on, that you've been led down this road by marketing, that it's actually a good consumable product for you. But really, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll stay with you on this one. Is just a few sort of thoughts. Here's, how do we rebuild that sisterhood? How do we rebuild, even if it's one-on-one, but what, that's a big question. I know but it's what, yeah, I love what your heart says about as like, how do we as a society build or rebuild that sisterhood that is in us. I listened to something yesterday. It was a 2-hour talk, but it was on remembering. And it was on remembering, and we tend to forget and remembering the past. And to me, there's something in us as women about gathering around a circle and gathering as sisters, whether we're blood sisters or not, but this gathering, and it's deep within us.
Mhm.
And we've lost it and then been pulled in these other directions of alcohol and other, uses of coping mechanisms. How do we
Yeah.
get that back?
Well, and I think that's kind of rooted in just how insecure we can feel as women, right? Like everything's targeted at looking good and having a certain body and, having a great career and being the best mom. And, really, I think that's a huge part of it. And, when you actually start having honest conversations about your own insecurities with other women, that's where you find that link, right? It's like, oh, I feel the same way. I feel like I don't live up to this and, I'm subpar at that. And, you start to connect that way a little bit more. So I think like dropping your shield is a good way to connect with other women and help rebuild a sisterhood. Like that's actually based in healthy behaviors.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's like dropping the armor.
Yeah.
Like taking that
Yeah.
armor off that we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Kathy, I'll let you step in.
Mm. Oh, wow. There's so much to say to that. I think as women, we need to, as Melissa said, drop the shield and feel safe with one another to be able to be authentic and share our true honesty and be truthful. And we have to feel safe to be able to do that. So we need to create a safe space to do that. And there's ways of creating a safe space to do that and becoming vulnerable and being brutally honest and letting go of the judgment and letting go of the guilt and letting go of the shame, right? We should be able to, and to find people within your life that you can do that with. I mean, not everybody's ready for that, but certainly there are people that are. And you talk about, we crave it and go back. I think, Linda, you said something about the circle and going back to that. Well, I mean, societally and culturally, women are built to work in circles and support each other. It's only in Western civilization that we have created this nuclear family and we're not living in multi-generational families anymore where we've got aunts and grandmas and grandpas like we used to. I mean, even in Western, hazard to say white Western culture, we used to live like that too. And we can get a lot of really good examples, I think, from Indigenous culture, how they live and support each other. I mean, their aunties are so important within their communities. And these women look after each other. They rear the children all together. The grandmothers are involved. And that's the way I believe that our DNA is how women are meant to be, right?
Mhm.
And our societies are meant to be more matriarchal as well and have a bit of that control. And because we live in more of a patriarchal society now, we become more isolated. And we become isolated just because of the way the culture has moved. But we need to get back to that. And if that means sitting honestly, authentically with one good friend or a sister or cousin or whoever you can find that you can just sit and say, let's be real here. It starts there. If you can find a women's circle, I'm involved with a couple circles of women where we have established it's an intergenerational women's circle, so it's women of different generations getting together. That's important too, where older women help guide younger women, and then we have these conversations, and then we're feeling heard, and we're feeling nurtured and supported without any judgment. Then we have these relationships that help us cope and things we can go to, and then we don't need to turn to things to help, whatever your poison is in terms of self-medicating. And I think that this is the kind of thing that we need to get back to. And I mean, I know we can, and it starts with one, right?
Yeah.
You make a decision. I'm me. Okay, what person in my life am I going to call today or tomorrow and say, hey, let's get together for coffee.
Yeah.
I really need someone to talk to. You know, if someone calls me up and says, oh my God, Kathy, I really, really need someone to talk to. If you got some time, I just need to,
Yeah.
and I'm open to that, it'll come back to me too. And you build it from there.
Yeah.
That's my feeling. You build it
Yeah.
from there.
Absolutely. So I've asked both of you to bring a few pieces of wisdom to share. So as we close this out, I would love that you sort of bring this into, a pinpoint and just share with those that are hearing this and need to hear this. What wisdom what would you share with them? That after we've shared all that, but what if we had to sort of drill this down? Melissa, I'll let you go there.
If it makes you happy, it doesn't have to make sense to other people. That's a good one, because you can think on that in so many different situations. And also a little mantra in my head going through the times that I've had to go through, this saying, and I read it, it's sometimes later becomes never. So I interpret that as, like there's like now, you know, why wait on it? Why procrastinate on it? Just start taking actions to make it happen.
Wow, that's a big one. That's a
Yeah.
powerful one. Wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing this. Wow. I'm gonna think on that one. Uh,
You can think
Kath-
and think.
yeah, oh yeah, that one just sort of set right in. That one just sort of just landed. Wow, thank you. Kathy, what about you?
Wow, I love that, Melissa. Sometimes later is never. Um, I think that couple little things. So one of the things, if you're sitting in this moment and you're listening to this and you're thinking about your relationship. We're talking about alcohol. So let's say alcohol. Play the movie forward. If you do nothing today, how are you going to be in 6 months? Better or worse? How do you look in 6 months? Is it the same or is it worse? Because it could be the same and it could get worse. So playing the movie forward. And I think about that a lot myself when I think about, oh, maybe I'll go and have a drink. And then I think about, oh, I'm going to play the movie forward. The movie forward will be, how am I going to feel at 2:00 in the morning? How am I going to wake up in the morning and get out of bed? And how clear is my mind going to be? What did I say when I had a drink the night before that I don't remember? Oh my God, who did I text? This kind of stuff. So playing the movie forward, I think is very, very helpful. And then I guess the other thing would be, it's just to be, don't be fearful about these things. Don't be fearful. Just have the courage to say no and be your truth. You know it. Your body knows it. Inside your body knows it. If you're questioning your relationship with alcohol, you know it. You know
Yeah.
it's a problem. So just admit it.
Yeah.
Admit it.
Yeah.
Move forward. Just admit it.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah. And I think maybe tied to that is that it is that step of asking, having that courage to go to another sister and ask for help, ask for support.
Right.
Is having that,
That's
and
right.
that's such a big step and such a courageous step.
Mhm.
So Kathy, you turned us on to a book, and Melissa and I shared her TED Talks. This Ann Dowsett Johnson, and she has a TED Talk, and I will share that. Kathy's got the book right there. But one thing that she said, and I want to close with this, is she says our secrets keep us very sick. I'd like to add on to that. This is me adding on to it, not her. Is our sharing makes us healthy.
Mhm.
And sharing
Beautiful.
what we've done here and what you've both done, and what she's done, like that brings our health back. So with that, thank you both. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, powerful conversation. We will share a summary. We will share resources that we have all looked at and shared. We will share them with you. And please reach out. Reach out to a friend or reach out to either of these ladies. We will put in their contact information. Reach out to somebody, and or share with us how, did you enjoy this talk, or what resources you might have. And Inspire Me Forward is going forward, and we have more talks and more interviews with more amazing people coming along. Join us on Facebook, our Inspiring Me Forward group. You can click subscribe for YouTube and be notified of any new ones that come up. And we've got 22 episodes in the past that are wonderful and very worth watching. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Linda.
From my
Thank
heart.
you so much.
Thank you.